Alright, so it's been about a week since Wind and Truth has been released. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me just to talk about Brandon Sanderson as an author and why I love his books so much. And maybe even talk about some of the criticisms I've heard of Sanderson and his writing. So stay tuned, that's coming up here on Drew's Book Reviews. Good day, and welcome to another episode of Drew's Book Reviews. So let's talk about Brandon Sanderson, my current favorite active author, and probably my favorite author of all time. So Sanderson has definitely come out as a giant in the fantasy books and the fantasy stories that we've come to love and admire. Some of us really love Sanderson, such as myself. Others, not so much. There are some valid criticisms of Sanderson that I wanted to talk a little bit about, but also talk about why I love Sanderson so much. So of course, as always, don't forget to hit that like, comment, subscribe. You know the routine. And also the link to the Dragon's Den Discord will be linked below as well. So now that we have book 5, the first arc of the Stormlight Archive is complete. It is out. I'm currently reading it and really enjoying it. I am working on putting together a vlog style video of my read of Wind and Truth. So stay tuned for whenever I manage to get that out. I think this book is probably going to take me like a month long to read, which is 1,300 pages long, which is actually a perfect segment into some of the criticisms that I've heard about Sanderson that I wanted to take some time to talk about today, but also why I love Sanderson so much as well. So of course, as mentioned, 1,300 pages for Wind and Truth. That is a big, massive book. I mean, that's more pages than some book series. Like, it's just huge. And this is often one of the things that I've heard about Sanderson as a criticism, is that his books are just too massive, too big. They are intimidating, and it can be kind of scary, intimidating to get into it and try and start reading Sanderson when there is so much you don't know about him. You worry, do you want to start a series that's going to take that much commitment? What if it turns out you didn't really like it? Or you want to focus on books and stories that maybe you could read more, so you kind of avoid having those big epic commitments with these massive books. That is something that I've heard, and you know what, I think that is a very valid concern. That's a very valid criticism. I mean, honestly, there's a reason I don't recommend getting into the Cosmere with the Stormlight Archive. I don't, and there's a reason for that, and that's simply because of the sheer massive scale of the Stormlight Archive and just how big it is as a book series, how big each individual book is. In fact, I have a recommended reading order for Sanderson's Cosmere. I'll try to remember to link that in the cards up above, but that is here on the channel as well. I think that's very valid, which, like I said, is why I don't recommend starting with the Way of Kings or the Stormlight Archive in general. Usually it's Elantris or Warbreaker or even the Mistborn series, which are a little bit easier to get into and not such massive scales, to kind of get a taste for Sanderson and his world building and the types of stories he writes. One of the other criticisms that I've heard about Brandon Sanderson is that he can be a bit long-winded, so to speak, bloated in his writing. And you know what? To some extent, that is true. There are parts of his books which have that, overall, Sanderson is really good at the slow burn, but sometimes you take a look and you're reading through, and I believe Andrew's Wizardly Reads said this in a recent short, that you could remove a couple hundred pages from some of his books, and it's still going to make a good, comprehensive, full package story. And you know what? That's probably true. And I think that that's absolutely right in many ways and in a lot of sense, and that there's nothing wrong with saying you didn't need to take that many words to tell a story. But that's one of the things about Sanderson, is he is a guy that likes to write a lot. He likes to take a lot of words to say sometimes not a lot, but he does it in a very effective way, personally, I feel. And I totally get that feeling it's a bit bloated and a bit much, and there's a bit too much in some aspects of the writing that really could be trimmed down a lot, and I totally get that as well. And that's definitely not for everybody. One of the other criticisms I've heard with respect to Brandon Sanderson is his humor just is tacky and corny and not all that funny. And you know what? His humor is tacky and corny and not all that funny. I fully admit that. To be honest, I kind of like the tacky, corny humor in Sanderson's books, but I totally get that it's not really that it's not for everyone. Some people just find it stupid and aggravating. I've heard that, and you know what? You're right. It can be stupid and aggravating and annoying at times. Sometimes I'm like, oh my god, really? But I still overall, of course, enjoy his works. Totally get the aspect about the humor in his books and being not that funny. I mean, he does kind of just make up his own curses, like storming in his books, for example, as curse words, which to me I find kind of humorous in its own way, because it's a stupid little swear, honestly, along with some other things and other types of kind of dad humor, dad jokes, corny jokes, that kind of thing, and even potty humor sometimes, kind of talk fun little jokes about that, and I get it. That's not the kind of humor for everybody. So definitely I do understand some of the criticisms of Brandon Sanderson, and I would agree with some of the criticisms in that respect. Yeah, he can be a bit bloated. Yeah, he can. His books can be massive, and it is a huge commitment to try and read through them. And yes, his humor can be kind of corny and stupid at times, and I totally get that. And I understand that completely. But you know what, honestly, when it comes down to it, there are so many things that I absolutely love about Brandon Sanderson's writing. Now, I was first introduced to Sanderson as an author through the Wheel of Time series. When he completed the Wheel of Time, I never heard of Brandon Sanderson before that. And when I learned that he was the one that finished Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, I decided to try out some of his other books, starting with like The Atlantis and Warbreaker. And from that point forward, I just got hooked. Things that I love about Sanderson is that his powers of world creation are just amazing. He's created so many different worlds, and he's so good at world building. It's part of that slow burn aspect of his storytelling, which honestly is not for everyone. That slow burn just doesn't work well for everybody, and I totally get that. But it's through that slow burn and build up that we get so much intricate, detailed world building that you just become enveloped and surrounded by this world. And for me at least, that draws me into this story, and we really get to know our characters through that slow burn as well. I don't really have a preference for slow burn versus fast burn, but I can tell you that some stories that are executed crazy quickly is you really don't get to know the characters, and you lose sight of the individuals the characters are, because it's overshadowed by the plot. With Sanderson, I don't find that at all. I find that the characters are just as much part of the story as the overall plot. Their development and execution through that slow burn and really getting to know them, and I love that about it. One of the other things I absolutely love about Brandon Sanderson is the fact that the universe in which he's created, I find to be so inherently unique in the fantasy genre. Yes, we could say that there are other universe. There's the universe of the Wheel of Time, the universe of Lord of the Rings, the universe of the Realm of the Elderlings, the universe of Harry Potter universe, for example. All these different fantasy stories that we have, all the different authors out there writing some fantastic fantasy, and there's some really great fantasy out there beyond Sanderson, absolutely. But so all these other authors, their universe encompasses one single world, but not Brandon Sanderson. He has created an entire cosmere or universe of worlds, and each story that he tells, whether that's Stormlight Archive or Mistborn or Atlantis or Warbreaker or the secret novels, like Trust of the Emerald Sea or The Sunlit Man, Sixth of the Dust and White Sand. Every single story he tells, Dragonsteel Prime, as another example of that, every single story and set of stories that he tells takes place on a different world within the same universe. And while other stories definitely have like alternate realms and that kind of thing, Malazan Book of the Fallen is a great example of that. There are kind of alternate realms within that world, but it's still kind of a single world that is connected to alternate realms through the magic system. Sanderson has a whole universe of a bunch of worlds interconnected while still having those alternate realms, like the cognitive realm like Shadesmar, for example, and the spiritual and physical realms, and everything being so interconnected while still being able to have unique magic systems on each world set in the cosmere. I love that expansiveness about it, and it's incredible, it's amazing, it's unique, and I don't know of a single other active writing fantasy author today that has managed to do that and pull that off. So definitely that is something I absolutely love about Brandon Sanderson. And the guy is incredibly prolific as an author as well. He's so connected to his fan base. He communicates effectively with his fan base as well. He's got regular updates on his website. He's got his YouTube channel where he has like those Q&A sessions, and he's always been so good at communicating with his fan base, which I find is incredibly unique with authors. Not that other authors don't communicate with their fan base, but the way in which Sanderson does it is very unique to his style, and I like the way that he's done that. And that to me is also an incredible thing about Sanderson as a writer. It goes beyond just having a unique creative experience and a unique characters and worlds beyond your typical fantasy universe, which typically only has one world in it. He is so good at just basically keeping in touch and, communicating what's going on with his writing with his fans, far more than I've seen from any other author out there, honestly, and that is just a fantastic thing. He also has become an extremely strong advocate for authors in the industry. He's an advocate. He basically took on Audible and won to get a fair deal for all authors, and that is just incredible. He's got that power behind him because he's so popular. He's got the weight there, and companies like Audible have got to listen when he says this isn't right. And I think that was an amazing thing for him to do. And when I read that he was doing that and I found out that he was taking on Audible to get a fair deal for authors, I thought, wow, that is just amazing. This is something that I absolutely love about this guy. So much about what Sanderson does as a writer, both in the terms of his stories and the kind of person he absolutely seems to be as presented in his public image. I don't know what he's like behind closed doors. I know there have been some authors where, if we put our heroes, so to speak, on too high of a pedestal, we're inevitably disappointed when they fall off that pedestal. And, I don't think that I've done that myself with Sanderson, because I know that he's a person too. What we see of him in the public domain, at least, seems to be he's a pretty decent guy all around. And I absolutely love how effectively he communicates and advocates for other authors in the industry, which is a pretty cool thing too. All around, Sanderson has fantastic storytelling, incredible world building, great characterization, and he is just so good at what he does. I love Brandon Sanderson's book. Absolutely. I know this is a bit of like a gush video on Sanderson, but honestly, I just love this guy's writing so much, and I would love to be able to finish reading everything in the Cosmere, but it still hasn't been published yet. So here's hoping Sanderson can actually finish the Cosmere in his lifetime, because that would just be sad if he didn't. I don't know if anyone would be able to do it as well as he has. But anyway, those are just some of my thoughts on Brandon Sanderson as an author. And you know what? I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of Sanderson? Good or bad? Just as long as we keep it respectful in the conversation, I'm totally open to hearing that. I even acknowledged at the beginning of this video the fact that there is some valid criticism of Sanderson as a writer and the way in which he writes, which is totally fine, because I know not every author is for everyone, but Sanderson is definitely an author for me. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you for commenting. Join us over on the Dragon's Den Discord, and as always, until next time, keep on reading. Bye.